I just happened to take this week after Christmas off to chill, play some games, and give myself a mental breather. I didn't bother doing a Halloween or Christmas review this year, as I've just been busy doing other things as of late, and truth be told, I'm a lazy asshole. Anyway, let's forget about all that crap and put 2021 behind us. Crack open a bottle of some bubbly, and sit back as we do something new in this channel. A clickbaity top 10 list. These are just my favorite games of all time. Before anyone gets the jump on their keyboards, I'm not saying that these are the best games ever, just the ones that I enjoy the most. For the sake of not having the same old boring repetitiveness as other review channels, let's switch this up and reverse the order, going from number 1 to number 10, where I personally think this list gets a little bit more interesting. So let's start off this new year with my favorite game of all time, our number 1. The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. There is nothing I can say about this game that hasn't already been said. For the 3 people that saw my video about the SNES Classic, this may be a little bit of a rehash. But for everyone else, I'll just tell you about my experience with this game. When I was a wee little lad, I sold off my NES collection at a garage sale and had the option to buy into the 16-bit era of gaming. I weighed my options between the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo, pulled all my allowance and garage sale money I had, and bought a Sega Genesis. And hey, you know what? I really liked it. I loved me some Sonic, Earthworm Jim, Street Fighter Championship Edition, Toe Jam and Earl, and of course some Madden 96. Bless that beautiful man. I was done with the Mario era and wanted something a little bit more edgier and grown up. I didn't regret that decision one bit. That is until I went over to a friend's house that owned The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. Zelda 1 was my favorite game previously, but I had never got into Zelda 2 and just sort of wrote off the series after that. When I picked up the controller and played A Link to the Past, I knew I had to get a Super Nintendo as soon as possible. I honestly don't even remember how the hell I ended up with the Super Nintendo, but I did, and my first order of business was to get down, dirty, and I dare say sexual with Zelda. This game blew my nips off and was every single thing I wanted in a sequel to my then favorite game. It is perfect in every way. The music is perfect, the gameplay is perfect, the difficulty is perfect, the secrets, the hidden shit, the graphics, it's just perfect. This is one of those games that is dangerous for me, in the sense that anytime I turn it on, I find it nearly impossible to put down. I accidentally put in 2 hours of gameplay into this just to record a few minutes worth of footage. Whoops. Number 2, Super Mario RPG. Super Mario RPG is what you get when you have the best developers of both RPGs and platformers on the planet together working on the same game. Not to mention an incredible soundtrack by Yoko Shimomura, who also did the music for Kingdom Hearts, another game with a legendary soundtrack. I remember I rented this game as soon as my local rental store had a copy. I got maybe a third of the way through before I had to return it. Afterwards, I saved up every penny I had and did some shoveling around the neighborhood to get additional cash so I could afford my own copy. This game has a little bit of everything for everyone. Mario RPG has a distinct gameplay style that has never been fully duplicated to this day, even on the spiritual successor Paper Mario series. You control Mario on an isometric plane using the same graphic engine as Donkey Kong Country. At its core, it's a very accessible RPG. You find and buy items, fight enemies which are in the field of vision and not done via random battles, learn new moves, fight bosses, gain experience points, customize your stats, and all that other great RPG goodness. But that's not all. You also get all that platforming action you'd expect from a Mario game. This game has loads and loads of charm. One of my favorite moments being when Bowser joins his arch nemesis Mario for the first time in the series' history. You can play as the standard hero Mario, the tadpole or cloud person Mallow, Geno, a cult favorite, Bowser, and Princess Peach. Each character has their own abilities and are useful in their own ways. I find it to be a lot of fun to try new builds with each playthrough, like a full special Bowser build or a full attack power Peach. There are loads of side things to do in Mario RPG, and it's likely that you won't get to all of them your first time through without a guide. A general playthrough of this game takes just about 10 hours, and I fully recommend that everyone watching this play Mario RPG at least once. Number 3, Earthbound. Here's a game that has creeped up on everyone's top whatever list over the years, and for good reason. But here's where I might have to be that guy and tell you that I've been an Earthbound fan since the year this game came out. My local rental store had a copy, and I was completely enamored with the giant display box that came with it. For weeks, the copy that they had was constantly rented out. I would go to the store every morning waiting for it to be returned, as it was quite literally down the street from my house. Finally, it came in and I was able to rent it. The weird thing is that Earthbound is maybe the second RPG I ever played outside of the Final Fantasy Legend on Game Boy and a handful of minutes of Dragon Warrior on the NES. But once I started playing Earthbound, I was hooked. I couldn't put the controller down. For hours and hours I played this rental like it was the best thing I'd ever seen. When I had to return Earthbound back to the rental store, it was time to see if I could find my own copy. So I had my dad drive me down to Best Buy and I found a new copy for only $20 on clearance. In that big box came a player's guide, and it's one of my favorites to this day. I love the vacation pamphlet style that they went with. Earthbound is one of the quirkiest retro RPGs you'll ever find, and it rarely takes itself too seriously. Sure, there are some real subjects and whatnot in there, but they're wedged between some fights with cultists that want to paint the world blue and new age retro hippies. Sure, Earthbound does have its flaws, like the inventory management or the fact that a lot of the best items in the game are locked behind ridiculously lucky enemy item drops, but really, it's all about the journey. Earthbound joins Mario RPG in being two of the most lighthearted RPGs I've ever played. I recently did a 15-hour, 2-part stream of an Earthbound playthrough on this channel if you want to click and check that out. This could easily be in my number 2 spot, but I believe Mario RPG is the more complete package, so this went down a spot. Earthbound won't be a game that everyone will enjoy, but if you have a broad sense of humor and don't mind a challenging old school RPG experience, then give it a shot and I think you'll love it. Number 4, Chrono Trigger. Chrono Trigger is a game that I wanted years after it came out, and the reason why might be a little odd. At the time, I was a big fan of Dragon Ball Z, and it started to get a nice foothold in the US. I, like many other nerds at the time, would go home from school and immediately tune in for some balls to the wall martial arts action. I absolutely love the art style of Dragon Ball Z by Akira Toriyama, which leads me right into Chrono Trigger. I remember seeing the box art for this, and well, look, it's Goku with the sword. That's all I needed to hunt down a copy for myself, so I entered a waiting list in my local Funko-Land and eventually picked up a copy for $30, which was sort of steep at the time. In hindsight, I should have just eBayed the complete version for a cool $100. Anyway, Chrono Trigger is just like the best. It's the best RPG with the best music, with the best characters, with the best story. Why is it number 4 on my list? Well, probably because I played it after 1 through 3, so it's a little less nostalgic. I can sit here and ramble on and on as to why Chrono Trigger is amazing and all, but really, it just is. If you're a fan of RPGs and you haven't played Chrono Trigger, then stop stalling and get to work. Number 5, Mega Man X. Mega Man is a series I absolutely loved growing up. It's a great mix of run and gun, platforming, and strategy. There were a whopping 6 Mega Man games that came out of the Nintendo and 4 on the Super Nintendo, if you count Mega Man Soccer, which is just terrible. The original NES games are some of the harder games on the console, but I mostly love them all. Mega Man X is the perfect next-gen sequel to the entire Mega Man series. It's like somebody at Capcom said, hey, let's lower the frustrating aspects of the series down a little, but add more speed. Lots of speed. And that's exactly what Mega Man X is. Capcom introduced heart tanks, refillable energy tanks, permanent upgrades, and even Ryu's Hadouken into the game as a hidden upgrade. The level design is fantastic, the bosses are fun, and the gameplay is just perfection. There are just a couple things I don't particularly love about this game, such as the fact that Chill Penguin is the only first stage option, which sort of locks you into a stage pattern, or collecting certain power-ups with the boomerang weapon. This thing just sort of works when it wants to. Other than that, Mega Man X is another one of those games that I just absolutely cannot put down once I start playing. Check out the channel for a full stream of Mega Man X if you'd like. Number 6, The Legend of Zelda. The Legend of Zelda was probably the first non-platforming game I ever played all the way through, and it actually helped me learn how to read. Not to mention it came encased in a badass gold cartridge. Zelda is an open world action RPG with a ton of hidden stuff to find, puzzles to solve, and dungeons to explore. It's not always obvious where to go next or what to do, but that's where the manual and the maps included with the game come in handy. I remember spending hours exploring every little corner of the world, trying to find all the items and heart pieces until I memorized pretty much everything, even to this day. Zelda is a surprisingly challenging game, but in a totally fair and balanced way, unlike say Star Tropics. The soundtrack is one of the most iconic in gaming and will stick with you forever. Zelda, for a while, I had thought moved out of my top 10, then I gave it another playthrough recently and beat it in one sitting. Even after all these years, I still can't put down the controller once I start playing it, and that's why it sits firmly at my number 6. Number 7, Kirby Superstar. When I was a youngster, I loved me some Kirby's Dream Land, Kirby's Adventure, and Kirby's Dream Land 2, released on the Nintendo Game Boy and the Nintendo Entertainment Systems. They were all great looking, easily accessible adventure games where you played as a blob that absorbs his enemies to use different powers. The graphics were always fantastic for the era, and the music is still stuck in my head some 25 years later. So how did Nintendo follow up in these 3 excellent titles? With Kirby Superstar, a late release SNES game. I remember wanting a complete box version of this as a young teen and found a copy for $20 on eBay when it was still new. I had to go make a cashier's check and ship it out to Canada to pay for it. What a time. It took like 2 months for it to finally arrive, and I fell right in love with this game. Instead of having just one big game, Kirby Superstar gives you 7 games in varying difficulties and times to beat. If you want some traditional Kirby action, play through the Spring Breeze or Revenge of the Meta Knight modes. If you want a pseudo Metrovania, you can play through the Milky Way Wishes mode. Have a knack for collectibles? Go to the Great Cave Offensive. Note, I've never been able to get all the collectibles in one playthrough. It's pretty challenging. If you're a sucker for minigames, there are a few for you, like Samurai Kirby, where you need to press attack as fast as you can before your opponent can. It's dumb fun. There's a racing mode which is pretty fun, but the real gem is in the Megaton Punch minigame. All you need to do is line up the indicators 3 times and outpunch your opponent, but it's a little harder than you'd think. I was actually able to do a perfect punch, which splits a star in half. Kind of a big deal. Oh, and did I mention that everything here is 2-player? You can turn your absorbed powers into a follower that fights along with you, a new feature in the Kirby universe. The second player can pick up a controller and start playing along. The minigames are also 2-player. It's all dumb fun and I absolutely love it. Number 8, WWF No Mercy. Diggity dog. Socko. WWF No Mercy is the pinnacle of pro wrestling games. Back in the day, pro wrestling games were pretty garbage. The games on Nintendo were kind of cool for the time, but they were really shallow and playable for only 30 minutes or less. Super Nintendo and Sega were no better either. Just a mostly miserable experience all around there. Honestly, it was just miserable being a wrestling fan and expecting a good video game. That is, until the Aki Corporation started developing games on the Nintendo 64. They made 4 total wrestling games on the Nintendo 64, and they just kept getting better and better. WCW vs NWO World Tour was the first, and while maybe it doesn't hold up as well now, it blew my mind at the time. The controls became a staple throughout the entire series. WCW NWO Revenge was the follow-up to World Tour and improved on everything. Better graphics, tighter controls, bigger roster, customization, and more. What I really like to do is rename the characters into weird joke names. Maybe they were a little, childish. I never really hear people talk about this game, but it deserves mention if you're looking for a great game with the WCW roster in it. There were a couple other WCW games released on the Nintendo 64, but they're fucking terrible. Just pretend they don't exist. That brings us to Aki Corporation's first WWF game, WWF WrestleMania 2000. Now, on top of a robust roster, great entrances, new game modes and type controls, there is a new and incredible Create a Wrestler feature. This feature would become the gold standard for wrestling games even to this day. And that brings us all the way to WWF No Mercy, the last Aki game released on the Nintendo 64. It takes the best of all the previous 3 games, improves upon everything, and added in a ton more. You want a gigantic roster of all the main stars? Well, you got it. You wanted an expansive story mode that has hours upon hours of replayability? You got that too. You want to earn rewards and unlock new moves, characters, and outfits? You got that too. On top of all of this, you have the best Create a Wrestler feature a wrestling game has ever had. WWF No Mercy aged like fine wine. It's perfect, fun, and replayable as hell. Number 9, Destruction Derby. Here's a hidden gem that never gets the credit it deserves. Destruction Derby on the Nintendo 64 is probably my favorite racing game of all time, and I'm bummed that it never got a real sequel. Don't get this confused with the 2 Destruction Derby games on the PlayStation. Those are just terrible. I guess I'm not even sure why they call it a racing game. Outside of the time trial mode, it doesn't really matter if you're faster than another car or not. In this game, your sole purpose is to score points. The easiest way to score points is to have head-on collisions with other cars on the racetrack. You can also score points for crossing checkpoints or finishing off other cars. Not every track is a race, as there are plenty of Destruction Derby pits to get some good smashing in. There are tons of tracks and a ton of different cars to unlock. The music keeps you engaged, the controls are great, and there's just so much action on the screen. If you want to be a real boss in the main mode, then spend a few minutes unlocking the best cars in the time trial beforehand. Number 10, Extra Innings. Extra Innings!
Extra Innings!
I first played this one at a friend's house as a kid and instantly fell in love with it. It's good old arcade baseball action. There isn't a whole lot to do in this game other than to play. Sure, you have a full-length season mode or create a custom team, but the real draw to this game is simply how well it plays and how fun it is. Pitching, batting, and fielding all feel natural and easy to learn. It feels great to smash a home run out of the park or make a diving catch. I love the little cutscenes you get after hitting a homer. The only thing I don't like is that the season mode doesn't keep track of your player stats. But if you love baseball and have a few minutes to kill, then Extra Innings is the game for you. And that's it! That's all I got for 2021. I have another backlog of games to get through and more AVGN second chances to do, so stick with me and we'll get to all those in due time. For Gaming Wisconsinly, I wish you all a fruitful 2022. Thanks for watching.